Login accepted. Now initializing.
Hi, I'm Andre Faust, aka as the tech guy. I'm doing these videos because I want to share my 40 years experience that I've had in web development and well, the whole range of computer technology, networking, programming, assembly, disassembly, the whole game bit. So over the next while I'll be touching a bit on everything, but for now I'm focusing on HTML for the absolute beginner, not somebody who has a little bit of knowledge. I mean the absolute beginner. That's the intent of these tutorials, and the format is monkey see, monkey do. The video tutorial itself, I will show you the layout, the tags, and all you have to do is repeat it, and you'll get the same results. Now, the theoretical component of it, I include that in a set of notes which will be made available on the net for you to read if you wish to get a deeper understanding of what it's actually doing. But the video themselves are basically learn as you do. And of course, you experiment and you see if you get different results. It can get kind of fun. In part one, we did talk about that there's 4 main tags that we use, and that will get you a page with nothing to show on your browser, but it will put a page. At the same time, I've talked about there are a couple other things you need to include. It's not mandatory, but it's good practice to do so. One is the declaration at the beginning of the web page. That's the document type HTML. That tells the browser that you're using HTML5. I'm not going to talk about the other declarations for earlier versions because it's irrelevant. We're building HTML5. The browsers, all the major browsers understand it. That's the most up-to-date markup language that is available. Maybe we'll see HTML6, but for now I'm dealing with HTML5, and I'm telling you to tell your browser you're dealing with HTML5. Then I talked about 2 meta tags that again isn't required to put in, but I recommend strongly that you put them in. And go to the first tutorial to get a background on this here. I'm just doing a quick review. The 2 meta tags that you want to use is the character set, which tells the browser what character set you're using, and the meta tag for the viewport, which tells the browser that your web page has the potential of being responsive. And basically what responsive means is that the page, if you're looking at a teeny little screen, your page will adjust itself for that teeny little screen. Or if you're looking at it on a huge 40 feet by 60 foot screen, it'll adjust for that screen. But the responsive websites, that is going to be much further in these tutorials because that starts to get quite complicated on how to do it. But just for now, just get into the habit of just telling the browser that your web page has the potential of being responsive, and you'll appreciate it later on. Now in part 2, I'm going to be talking a bit about of storyboarding, and it's going to be in its simple form, and as the tutorials move on, the storyboards themselves will get more complicated. But for this one here, it's just to show you that it's a good idea to draw out your conceptual picture of what you want your page to look like. It seems to be a pain in the hiney, but trust me, in the end, it will pay off. I mean, I know I've learned by experience. I mean, I'm like the next guy, right? I tried to do it the short and dirty way in my younger days, and after many sites, I found that it was better to do the storyboard. And when it came time to talk to a client, I also found that the storyboard was also a good way to communicate to the client to find out what they wanted on their websites. Get used to doing a storyboard, and it doesn't take long. You just take a pencil and a piece of paper, just ding, 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 and you can do it in 30 seconds. It's very quick. It's not an intellectually demanding task. In our part 2, in the following tutorial, the basics, I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about div tags, h1 tags, span tags, HR tags, BR tags. That's all included in the video and in the notes, in the accompanying notes. Again, it's just the emphasis is on watch what I'm showing you and duplicate it. It's that simple, and you'll catch on to the concept, like I earlier said. Now, at the end of this tutorial, the basics, don't expect that you're going to be ready to start producing the most phenomenal, spectacular, awesome page. No, that's not going to happen. The end product is going to be this boring black text on white screen, because HTML doesn't care. All it does, it describes the data that's going on the browser. As far as style and appearance, it doesn't care. But this boring page is the lead-in for part 3, where I will be introducing Cascade style sheets. There are two. Right now there are 2 strains of Cascade style sheets, CCS2 and CCS3, but at this time I'm not going to separate the 2 of them. I'm just going to show you how you can use CSS to change the appearance of your web page. And even at the end of tutorial 3, we're still not going to be producing a spectacular page, but when we get into 4, tutorial 5, tutorial 6, it'll all start. Things will become more complicated, and your web page will start looking more professional than what they are in these tutorials, because these tutorials, it isn't to get you running. It's the first to get you to crawl, walk, and then run. Now, some may say, who's just tuned in and say, geez, these tutorials are slow moving. Well, these tutorials aren't designed for anyone who's had any experience. As I mentioned earlier, these tutorials are for people who have Zippo experience with developing web pages. It's for those, or for students that might have if they're taking an introductory course in HTML, who might get snagged up. Each tutorial is broken in very small units, not much information, but you can always go to the previous tutorial if you miss out on a little section. And once again, I emphasize that clarification notes are being supplied. They're going to be uploaded, and you'll have access through them. The links will be in the descriptor of the YouTube description, and they will be on the main site as well. So you can access the notes and the required files if needed, if the files are in fact needed, because some of these there won't be any files. So if you have any questions about anything that I've talked about in any video, or if you have any ideas for maybe a future tutorial for me to do, let me know. If you have any criticisms, that's good too, because that's how I build better mousetraps, is through criticisms. That's the way it kind of goes there. So I don't take any offense to criticisms, that's for sure. That's why it's called continuous learning. Having said all that, on to part 2, the basics.
Before starting any web page design, it's good to have a visual representation. Just for a point of interest, though, I am using a new piece of cloud software that has just been released actually within the last week. So this is my first time using it. You can get to it, to this drawing program at www.autodraw.com. And it's in, from what I understand, it's in the beta stages. So as I work my way through this, we may find some glitches. So there are two schools of thought on creating web page. One is just you roll up the sleeve and you start using your markup and you're on your way. But to do it properly and to save you time down the road, the best thing to do is to draw it out. In the technical terms, it's called storyboarding. So if you can get a visual representation of the page that you have in mind, it's best to draw it out. So we're going to, because this is the basic part of the tutorial, we're not going to do anything complicated. Our first page is going to be a 1-column, 3-row layout. Now, imagine this white square in front, that being your browser viewport, but really technically that the size of that white square that you see in the middle of the screen can go really to infinity, at least in the virtual world. But we have to put constraints to it to fit a browser viewport, not what it's like in the real world. So we're just going to start with our concept. Like I say, it's going to be a 1-column, 3-row page. We're going to use the tag, the header, and the footer, and a div tag in the construction. So let's draw out our page. Well, this little drawing program is not too bad. Okay, so there's what represents our browser's viewport. Right now this is a 1-column, 1-row layout. So we're going to split that up into 3 rows. First row is what we're going to call our header. And then we're going to cut it up again. Right now it's a 1x2 layout. So we're going to add our footer down here. And of course in here is going to be our content. So there's our visual representation. Now, on this concept, of course, the more complicated you get, the more you would put into your storyboard. But like I say, you use this storyboard to get a visual representation of what your page is going to look like. And trust me, I know through experience. I've tried to just go in and start writing markup, and it takes considerably more time if you don't have this visual representation. And as we go along and as our examples become more complicated, I will always be referring to the storyboard for visual representation. So with that in mind, we're ready to start our first basic HTML tutorial. Earlier I had spoken about the storyboard, And that's just basically a representation to what your page is going to look like. The first one we did was very simple. It was just a one column by three rows. This one here, because we're starting to add content, it's going to be a little bit more complicated. So let's take a look at this storyboard. Itchy nose. So I replaced the header with the main title of our page, and then in our content I put some titles in, and each one's a little smaller. I believe this here is going to be an H1 and H2, H2 for the subtitles, or I could go H2 and H3 for the smaller one. And here's our content. And then we finish off with our footer. A note on footer and headers. If you create multiple pages, those are going to stay constant. The content in your header and the content in your footer are going to remain the same throughout your pages. So if you have 10 pages, you're going to have your header and your footer are going to remain the same. So okay, so now we have our visual representation of what we think our content is going to look like. So now we're going to move along, and we're going to pull up our skeleton. And of course you can see our skeleton from the earlier part 1. It's all laid out, but this one here has some changes into it. I've added a header tag, not to be confused with the head tag. This is a separate tag, and of course what's in between here is referred to as is your elements. And then we've added our div tags. Now the div tag is a block display type, meaning that it'll always create a new line. Same with your H2s. They're the same. What they do is that they're block type as well. Your P's are block display type. Your footer's a block display type, and your HR tags are block type. So what is an HR tag? That just means a straight line, and I put those in there just to visually show you how the page is split up. They're not necessary, but for this demonstration I've included them in there, and it's just to make life a little easier. And I will also introduce a span, which is an inline block, or excuse me, an inline display. So let's, rather than me typing everything out, I already have done a pre-layout. So we're just going to go over that. So I'll pull up this file here. So as you can see, our structure is the same, and notice I paid attention to indentations and whatnot, and it's to help you read the markup a lot easier. So in our header, what I've done is I put the title of our page, and I'm using an H1. Now I'm just going to back up a little bit. Back in the head section, not header, but head section, I put the title of our page, Widgets are us, and that's what's going to come up in the tab of your browser. So now we're back into our header. We've got the name of our page down. So the header is now closed. As we can see, that's all self-contained. Next we're going to move into our div tag, which I repeat is a block display. And I'll click on that, and you can see the opening tag, the closing tag. What's in between is the element. Always today I'm being plagued with itchy noses. So you'll notice that's an H1, meaning it's going to be a larger font than an H2. So in our H2, I put in our subcategory, and of course this is a fictional page talking about how great our widgets are, and whatever you want a widget to be, that's what it will be for the sake. Now I've used lorem ipsum text, which is Latin, is all in Latin, but there's really no coherence to it. It's just for demonstration purposes for this layout. So I have it inside a p tag, and there's the closer, just to prove it. And you see the blue highlighted. So that's a block display. So you know that the next line, there's going to be another line. And that's going to be our H2. The practical, that's what we're going to call it. So that would be just a description of how practical our widget is. That's all that it would do. And then we have our description. And then we add another subtitle, and that other subtitle is job specific with a description to it. So now that we have all that done, we have our content to it. Now earlier I had spoken about a span. Now I deliberately separated that as two separate lines, and the reason why I did that is that once we do the output, you'll see there's not going to be no new line. It's just going to be added to after this molesty, and it'll fit itself between molesty and a get nect. Our div is closed. Now we move on into our footer. Remember, that's the third row of that first column. We once again have our HR tag. That HR tag puts a line across the screen. Now in your footer, usually what you put in, the common one is the name of your business, your address, and your telephone number, and email. Now I could have done each one of these lines with using the P tag. That could have been P tag open, and then P tag close, P tag open, P tag close. But I decided to use a BR, which is for a line break. And what that does, it keeps the lines a little closer together. It's just a shortcut. Again, you use those kind of sparingly and under special conditions. Then we close off our footer, and then we close off our body. Remember, the tag is always closed with a /. And finally, our HTML that tells the browser that it's all over. So, what a distraction, that Samsung update. They always come in at the most inconvenient time. So let's quickly take a look at our nesting. HTML open, HTML close. Head open, head close. Title open, title close. Body open, body close. Div open, div closed. Header 2 open, header 2 closed. Paragraph open, paragraph closed. Header 2 open, header tag closed. Paragraph open, paragraph closed. Header 2 open, header 2 closed. Paragraph open, and paragraph closed. We have our span. Span open, span closed. Footer open, footer closed. HR, there is no closing brackets for HRs or BRs. Our P tag, open, closed. So that's, in essence, our first page. In a future tutorial, we're going to start to pretty this thing up. That is going to start looking more like a web page than just something boring and dry. So let's take a look at what the output of this little guy is going to look like. So I'm going to click on Basic, and there's what our page looks like. That's everything that we've done. Now up here, there's our widgets are us that came from the title tag. our H1 are widgets, and then our H2 are widget line, our practical, and our job specific. Those were all subtitles to the H1. So these are H2s, H2, H2. Here is our P tags, opening and closing, and as you can see, that's why these are blocks. Now, everything in here, under this line here, of course, that's our div tag. This is all enclosed inside the dig tab. We have another HR tag, which gives us this line and this line. Now you see how each one of these lines are broken up. If I would have used the P tag, there would have been one extra space in between. If I would have used P open, P close, P open, P close, P open, P close, it would have looked double space, and I didn't want that. That's why I used the BR tag. So as you can see, the name of our company, the address, some country, telephone number, and email. Like I say, your footer and your header, they stay constant from page to page. Your content can stay the same. So that wraps this portion up. Like I say, in the next tutorial, I'm going to introduce you to CSS 2 and CSS 3, and that is when we're going to start to make our page look like a page. Right now this is the bare bones, and just before we get into the CSS, I'll just give a little history to why CSS came. Originally, for every page you would have done with HTML. See, HTML does nothing for layout. It just presents the content in the raw form. Anyway, in the old days, if you did 5 pages, you would have had to use every HTML tag to give it whatever you want, color, font size, and whatnot. CSS makes life a lot easier because you can only need to do it once. So that's enough for now on CSS. You will learn more about it. So till next time, thanks for tuning in. And of course, if you have any questions, you can email me, which is located at the end of the video. Or if there's anything specific you would like me to do a video on, get a hold of me. So till then, thanks, and God bless.